The film opens in a hidden lab where a scientist is conducting a highly hazardous experiment. He is secretly working to develop a more powerful and superior life form. The object he is creating appears to be significant, but also quite dangerous. However, something strange occurs now. The scientist receives a call from an unknown man via a computer. This guy knows all about the scientist's secret work. He states that he even knows that the project has already been closed. Nevertheless, he tells the scientist that the work must go on at any cost. This new life form is the only one that can prevent something bad from happening, the end of the whole world, according to him. Now, the story brings in a man named Dr. Michael Swafford. He is a scientist who has already alerted people to this disaster in a book titled In the End, There Was Light. Shortly after, Dr. Michael is invited to a TV show to discuss his eerie theory. When a star dies, it forms a black hole and at the same time it emits a tremendous amount of harmful gamma-ray energy, he says. This energy moves through space like a deadly wave, destroying all that it encounters. Now the scary part. The doctor tells them that one of the stars in the Milky Way has already died and its deadly energy is coming directly towards them. This seems like another theory at first, but Dr. Michael appears to be very concerned. If no one does anything about this disaster, all life on Earth may be wiped out for good, he believes. Meanwhile, back in the lab, the mysterious man tells the scientist that finishing the project will not be easy. They must have the ideal test subject, but not just any subject. They require a broken person, someone who has a personality that is self-destructive. So, the two begin searching all over the world, trying to find the right person. They have checked out numerous individuals, and at last, they discover one that matches them completely. His name is Joe Stedman, 45, a security guard. Joe's life is already in shambles. He struggles with alcohol problems, gets angry very quickly, and can barely control himself anymore. But things were not always this bad. In the past, Joe used to spend happy moments with his family. One day, he, his wife Heather, and their little daughter Zoe were spending time together at the beach. Just before they left, little Zoe saw a lighthouse flashing its light in a peculiar manner. She was curious and asked her father about it. Joe said that the lighthouse was sending a secret message in Morse code just for her. After that, he slowly translated the message. She said, "I love you, Zoe." The little girl was happy, and for a brief instant, Joe's life was perfect. The family were soon home with an even bigger moment in their lives. Heather was pregnant and they were looking forward to the birth of their second daughter, Rhea. But sadly, life suddenly changed. A few years later, Heather became very sick. She was unable to survive whatever it was, and died. This really broke Joe. He was unable to deal with the loss of his wife. Gradually, he began to lose his mind. He grew angrier and more addicted to alcohol. This made him gradually alienate himself from his daughters, and eventually the family split. The years passed and both daughters grew up, but on different paths. Zoe made an attempt to move on. She worked hard and was now getting ready to graduate as a nurse. However, Rhea's life went haywire. She became involved in drugs and fell into a bad relationship with a criminal named Nico. Meanwhile, something was going on in the background that was very creepy. The scientist had been spying on Joe and his daughters every day using hidden cameras. He was gathering all of their information, studying Joe like he was a part of an experiment. One morning, the scientist watches Joe again. Joe is sitting in therapy this time, discussing how much he has progressed. He proudly says that he has stayed sober for more than a year. Things also seem to be getting better for him. He has finally got a new job as a security guard at Redlock. But most importantly, Joe wants to fix his relationship with his daughters. He then meets Zoe, who has just come back from spending time with a guy named Michael. However, the meeting doesn't go as Joe would like. Zoe doesn't seem to be pleased to see her father. She still has pain and anger in her after all these years. But Joe does his best to remain calm. He tells her that he is changing, that he is getting better in therapy, and he really wants to be a better dad. He then asks Zoe to help him out with talking to Rhea as he wants to make things right in the family. To show that he really cares, he even gives her a gift he bought for her. But Zoe won't take it. She says coldly that she doesn't want to talk to him now. Joe continues to strive. He tries to put the gift in her purse, but he is gentle and careful not to hurt her. However, suddenly, Michael becomes angry. He intervenes and tells Joe to get out of the way. That one moment is all it takes to bring Joe back to his anger. Joe finds himself unable to control himself. In anger, he punches Michael hard and pushes him against a fence, tightly grabbing his neck. Zoe is shocked and frightened. She yells at her father and tells him that he will never change. He's still the same angry man as before, she says, and she wants him out of her life. Hearing this completely breaks Joe. After finally calming down, he tries to apologize, but Zoe leaves with Michael without even looking back at him. Joe is now totally isolated. Later, he attempts to contact his younger daughter Rhea, hoping to mend fences with her as well, but she doesn't respond to his calls. Not knowing what else to do, Joe sits alone inside his car, feeling hopeless. While he's sitting there, he can't help but recall painful memories. He recalls the final time he was in the hospital with Heather. Heather knew that she had a short time left. She remained calm even in her sufferings and made one request to Joe. Before she left, she asked him to look after Zoe and Rhea. Joe said that he would keep their daughters safe, but now years later he feels like he let her down. His family is in shambles, his daughters despise him, and he has no clue how to fix anything. However, something dreadful occurs. Out of nowhere, a strange man suddenly appears in the passenger seat of Joe's car. Before Joe can even react, the man grabs him and starts choking him. Joe fights back and struggles to escape, but in the end, he passes out. Joe is then whisked away to a secret lab. There, the scientist performs something horrible. He takes a strange device and using a needle, he puts it right into Joe's right eye. After some time, Joe wakes up in a dark alley confused and in pain. One day, he begins to hear the scientist's voice in his head. The implant in his eye is now attached to his optic nerve. Joe suffers from a terrible headache, while the scientist calmly explains something unbelievable. He says that Joe has been selected to receive some sort of special power, but Joe is convinced that this is absolutely nuts. Then he sees a peculiar little briefcase in the vicinity. When he opens it, he finds pictures and videos of himself taken from hidden security cameras. This instantly makes him nervous. Inside the case, Joe also finds a gun. However, when he attempts to touch it, his head hurts again. The scientist tells Joe that he has turned on a system that is transmitting data straight into his brain. This information will aid Joe in performing future missions, he says. Then the scientist presents him with photographs of Zoe and Rhea, and everything gets a lot darker. The scientist informs Joe that he must follow all orders, or he will never see his daughters again, or he will never be able to repair his relationship with his daughters. Joe has no choice. Suddenly, a woman comes up to him and asks him if he's okay. The scientist suddenly gives him his first mission, and Joe immediately asks her for help. Joe is shocked when he is told to take the gun and shoot the woman. He declines at once, but the scientist warns him of a terrible secret. If Joe fails to shoot her in 5 seconds, then his men will kill Zoe and Rhea. The scientist demonstrates that he is taking the situation seriously by showing a live video of 2 agents following Rhea. Joe starts panicking. There is a limited amount of time. He feels trapped and helpless, and slowly takes hold of the gun. He points it at the woman, and apologizes quietly with tears in his eyes for what he is about to do. He then pulls the trigger, but nothing happened. The gun has no bullets. Before Joe even understands what is going on, the woman suddenly attacks him. It was revealed that she had been working for the scientist all along. She stuns Joe with a taser and he falls unconscious again. Later, Joe awakens inside the trunk of a car. He panics and immediately picks up his cell phone and attempts to call the police for assistance, but as he begins to speak, the scientist's voice resounds once more. The scientist tells him that if he contacts the police, he will be killed right away. But now Joe knows that there's no way out. He's in some kind of perilous situation. Finally, the trunk opens and the scientist gives him a second mission. Joe has to retrieve the equipment stored in the car and head to an address that is directly sent to his iDevice. When Joe checks the location, he gets shocked. The address is that of Charles Margaret, the president of Redlock, where Joe is a security guard. Joe is instructed to wear a mask, bring a pistol and a small black box when he enters. According to the scientist, this device can control the building's security system. His task is easy and perilous. There is no other option for him but to place the black box on the main door, use it to gain access inside the building, and then make his way to the 3rd floor where Charles resides. He has no other option but to follow the orders. The scientist, meanwhile, is under the watch of flying drone cameras. If Joe makes just one mistake, Zoe and Rhea could die. The moment Joe walks into the apartment, the scientist begins to lead him, one step at a time. He tells Joe that there is a secret safe somewhere in the house. Joe has to make Charles tell him the password to open it. If he doesn't, the scientist warns him again. His daughters will be slaughtered on the spot. Joe is feeling trapped and slowly walks towards Charles's bedroom with a pistol and flashlight in his hand. He pretends to be tough and tells the old man that he is going to rob him and asks him to tell him where the safe is. Charles is frightened and confused and runs immediately towards the kitchen. Hidden there is a secret safe, but strangely, the scientist is not interested in money or jewelry. Rather, he instructs Joe to bring the laptop inside. Joe activates it, but it prompts for fingerprint access. Then something very odd occurs. The scientist suddenly instructs Joe to put his own finger in the scanner. Joe doesn't know why, but he listens. As soon as he touches it, the computer begins to run a genetic scan and everyone is shocked. Charles and the scientist are amazed at what they are seeing. The computer reports that Joe's DNA matches, but the scientist immediately gives him another order, which Joe doesn't know what it means. Joe has to connect a transfer device to the laptop and pass all the hidden files straight to him. There is no other choice, so Joe does what he's told. After some time, the transfer is finished, but now the bad news. The scientist tells Joe to kill Charles. Joe refuses immediately. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. Then Charles suddenly fights back, but before things get worse, the old man snatches up a vase and breaks it on Joe's head. Joe's eye is injured by the hit. The scientist connection suddenly becomes unresponsive. Charles snatches up the gun and shoots at Joe. However, Joe does not fight, but instead takes off his mask and shows his true identity. He says that he had to do all of this. Charles becomes shocked. Not only is Joe one of his own security guards, but somehow he is also the only person whose DNA matches the computer system. Joe still can't figure it out. He immediately informs Charles of the scientist who is controlling him with an implant in his eye. After hearing the truth, Charles gets angry. He reaches out to the scientist and tells him that he's completely nuts. Even Charles admits that the project was terminated for a very serious reason, but before he can tell what really happened, a drone suddenly appears. Suddenly, it strikes Charles right in the head. Joe is shocked and stands there frozen. Then the scientist gives another horrible order. He instructs Joe to remove scissors from his backpack and cut off Charles's thumb. The scientist states that he will require it for the next mission. Joe obviously doesn't want to do this, but he can't help it. Joe walks out of the apartment and is given another order. He has to go back to the Redlock Company and change the local security guard without being noticed. Meanwhile, another drone is dispatched to the building by the scientist. It secretly disperses small devices in the ventilation system. No one sees anything amiss, but as soon as Joe walks through the reception area, the scientist tells him to hurry and put on the protective mask. Then it all goes wrong. The hidden devices emit a deadly gas throughout the building. In just seconds, people start to fall to the ground. People die almost everywhere. Employees, guards, workers, everybody. The mask saves the life of only one man, Joe. The entire building goes silent and frightening. With the place now empty, the scientist gives Joe another task. In the main room there is a machine that needs to be turned on, but Joe only has 4 minutes. And once again, the scientist reminds him, if he fails, his daughters will suffer. Joe quickly rushes through the building trying to save time. Lastly, he arrives at the main room. The scientist tells him that he can take off the mask. However, when Joe looks around, he freezes. Dead bodies are strewn everywhere. Nearly everybody is dead from the poisonous gas inside. One of the security guards, somehow, wakes up. Before Joe can react, the guard grabs Joe's gun and starts shooting at him. Joe just manages to avoid the bullets at the last moment. He quickly fights back, seizes the gun once more and slams it against the guard's head. The man collapses and goes limp. Breathing heavily, Joe immediately asks the scientist what he should do next, but there is a problem. The gunshots have caused damage to the device in Joe's eye. Due to the interference, Joe and the scientist are no longer able to communicate. At the same time, the 4-minute timer is almost over. Joe starts panicking. Completely lost, he tries finding an exit by himself, but just in time, the device suddenly starts working again. The scientist's voice is heard again. He promptly leads Joe to a central computer in the room. He then tells him a strange command. Joe has to press Charles's thumb on the biometric scanner. Joe does just that. Suddenly, lights come on inside a large secret room when the scanner reads the fingerprint. A large machine is inside the chamber. Now, with Charles's thumb, the scientist has full control of the whole place. But the mission is not over yet. The scientist tells Joe that he has one more thing to do. He has to go into the machine and turn on another device from within the machine. Joe is nervous, but he has no other option as his daughter is being used against him. Slowly, he walks into the machine chamber. However, as soon as he walks in, the doors slam shut. As Joe is about to react, strong energy begins to fill the room. Joe panics and pleads with the scientist to discontinue the machine. However, the scientist is not willing to accept it. He said the experiment has to be finished for the benefit of mankind. The energy within the machine continues to increase in strength and strength. It begins to combine with Joe's genes soon. The power becomes so wobbly that all of a sudden, boom, the entire Redlock building is destroyed in a huge explosion. Minutes later, police helicopters surround the destroyed area. From far away, the scientist quietly watches everything and strangely he looks satisfied. The man who was there before suddenly calls him back and asks him if everything is going as planned. The scientist responds coolly, yes, Joe not only survived the experiment, he is now prepared for phase 2. Later, news channels start reporting the gigantic explosion at Redlock. Zoe reads the news and she instantly thinks that her father must have died in the accident. She is emotionally distraught when she sees all the other things except Michael. For the first time, she feels guilty. She feels that she should have given her father one more chance to prove that he has changed. Then there's a twist in the tale. Nearby, Joe suddenly wakes up. He is now enclosed in some kind of protective bag and he is now back in his own apartment. Confused, Joe has no idea how he survived such a huge explosion. He tries to reach the scientist, demanding, but then something strange begins to happen to his body. Slowly, a purple light starts to shine from his hands. Joe becomes terrified. He rushes into the bathroom and continues to call out for the scientist, but he doesn't respond. Joe's frustration and anger begin to rise again after all of his misfortunes, and one thing that cannot be believed occurs. His anger somehow turns into power. Joe punches the wall and a huge wave of energy goes through the wall, destroying part of the bathroom. Joe is standing there in a state of shock. The scientist then calls him again after a few moments. He cheerfully reports that the experiment was a success. Joe's body is now stronger than ever before, but there's more to do, he says. If Joe is to unlock his full power, he must pass a few more tests, the scientist says. And if he manages to pull it off, he will get his daughters back. Joe is fed up with being controlled, but he wants this nightmare to come to an end. So, he agrees. He goes to his apartment to get his car, and when he goes outside, the car is gone. Joe immediately gets angry again and something crazy happens. All that anger turns into a burst of electromagnetic energy. Then, a motorcycle in the vicinity suddenly starts on its own. The scientist describes what is happening. Due to the experiment, Joe's anger now becomes his own power. Then the scientist gives him another mission. Joe must go to an old warehouse. There, he will find Nico, the dangerous criminal involved with his daughter, Rhea. Joe quickly heads to the location. After arriving, he finally spots Nico, but before Joe can catch him, Nico blinds him using a bright camera flash. Then he quickly runs away. Joe chases after him, but Nico attacks from behind with an iron bar. The hit knocks Joe unconscious. Later, Joe awakens in a cage. Soon, Nico recognizes him. He comes to understand that Joe is Rhea's father, the same girl he has been selling drugs to. Nico doesn't feel threatened. He enjoys it. To make matters worse, he turns on a TV and what he sees is just too much to take. The footage depicts Nico hurting Rhea as she is lost in drug-induced hallucinations and cannot comprehend what is happening. As soon as Joe sees this, his anger erupts. Suddenly, a tremendous surge of energy explodes from him. The power permeates the whole warehouse and soon engulfs the place in flames. At the same time, something unbelievable happens in the middle of the city. For a few seconds, a giant figure made of pure electromagnetic energy appears in the sky. Then, just as quickly, it disappears. Watching everything through his drone, the scientist realizes something important. Though Joe is very strong, he has yet to attain his full strength. At the warehouse, Nico somehow manages to survive the explosion. He is still determined to kill Joe, and he takes a knife and attacks him, but something unexpected happens. The knife doesn't do anything at all. Joe's body is now too strong to be injured. Then one of his guards orders Nico to finish off Joe. The guard pulls out a gun and begins to shoot, but the bullets go right through Joe's body as if he were not even human. At this point, Joe completely loses control. He grabs the guard by the neck. Then, with his energy, he annihilates the man in a split second. Now there's only Nico left. Suddenly, Joe appears in front of Nico, who is terrified and immediately jumps into his car and attempts to flee. But suddenly, Joe appears right in front of him. Panicking, Nico presses the gas pedal and drives straight toward him, but this only makes Joe even angrier. In a flash, enormous waves of energy are once again bursting out of him and a massive explosion strikes Nico in the car. In a flash, Nico and his car vanish. Joe is in disbelief. He didn't want it to get this far. Joe can't stop these dangerous forces now and calls the scientist. He doesn't want to hurt anybody else again, but the scientist won't listen. He warns Joe that he still has not reached his full strength and must go through more tests. This time, Joe finally says no. He tries to escape, but before he can get far, several police officers surround him. Joe is arrested and handcuffed and brought to the police station. A detective asks him some questions inside. The detective has already witnessed the explosion in the warehouse and thinks that Joe must be some sort of criminal. Joe attempts to tell the truth. He wants to tell them about the scientist, the experiments, and everything that happened. But before he can speak, the scientist calls him again. He instructs Joe to alert the police to a bomb in the city shipyard. Joe has no choice. He obeys. The police immediately go to the shipyard to prevent the bomb. Meanwhile, Joe is under close guard in the station, but the scientist speaks again. This is just another test, he says, and only Joe can save the day from the bomb. If he fails, then part of the city will be destroyed. More than 20,000 people could die. And worst of all, Zoe and Rhea are also in danger. This causes Joe to get panicky. His feelings intensify and suddenly he begins to emit energy once more. The power is so great that Joe knocks down the police officer guarding him. Then, he punches his way through the wall of the station and runs out. With no time to lose, Joe hijacks a police car and drives toward the shipyard. But soon police cars begin chasing him. Meanwhile, the scientist delivers another horrific warning. Joe, if you don't hurry, your daughters will be dead in just a few minutes. The stress is too great. Joe's power begins to spin out of control. But something unheard of happens this time. His whole body becomes a pure energy. Now, Joe can run faster than he ever thought. Like a bolt of lightning, he races across the city in seconds. Meanwhile, the police chase is broadcasted on TV channels. For the first time, Zoe discovers something shocking. Her father is still alive, but she doesn't know what happened to him. Armed agents from the scientist suddenly break into her apartment before she can understand anything. Both Zoe and Michael are arrested. Meanwhile, Joe is racing through the city, but his powers are not 100% under his control. But, suddenly, disaster almost strikes. The electromagnetic waves coming from Joe's body accidentally hit an airplane flying overhead. For a second, it seems that thousands of people are going to die. But, luckily Joe quickly uses his powers and safely brings the airplane back down before it crashes. When everyone is safe, Joe rushes to Zoe's apartment. After everything that has happened, he just wants to make sure his daughter is okay. However, when he gets there, something is amiss. The apartment is vacant. All he has to do is a computer screen, and then the scientist pops up on screen. He calmly tells Joe that Zoe has been taken to a secret hideout, and if Joe stops following orders, she will die. However, this time it's different. Joe's finally fed up of being controlled. Gradually, he has begun to learn to use his powers. But Joe does not panic. He touches the computer screen and somehow he is able to follow the scientist's trail. In just seconds, Joe reaches the secret hideout. The moment he arrives, he quickly creates a protective force field around Zoe and Michael. Then all hell breaks loose. Joe blasts off big blasts of energy everywhere. The entire hideout begins to fall apart. Security guards try to stop him, but they stand no chance. Joe is able to easily knock them all out. The entire area goes quiet shortly. Then, Joe arrives at Zoe. Emotionally upset, she asks what happened to him. Joe assures them that he will tell them all of this later, but first they must save Rhea. But as no one can move, suddenly Michael pulls out a gun, and without warning, he shoots Zoe in the back. Joe is shocked, but then the biggest twist in the film. Michael was never innocent. He was the enigmatic man who was working with the scientist from the start. He reveals the truth. The dangerous gamma-ray energy has been released from a dead star in space and is coming straight towards the Earth. The whole world will be destroyed soon. Hence, they required the ideal test subject, a strong one capable of averting the catastrophe. And when they found Joe, Michael got close to Zoe on purpose just to secretly watch Joe and his family. However, there was one issue. When Joe gets really angry, his power increases. That is why Michael waited for the perfect moment and shot Zoe. The plan works. Joe is totally consumed with anger. His energy goes out of control. Joe then unleashes a huge explosion at Michael in a fit of rage, and Michael is instantly obliterated. But now, all that is gone. Joe runs to Zoe. Unfortunately, the bullet went into her heart. She has a limited amount of time remaining. Desperate, Joe tries using his powers to save her. Whatever he does, he can't save her from death. For the second time in his life, Joe loses someone he loves in his arms. Again, he can do nothing, but the nightmare is still not over. The scientist then comes in with a computer screen. Then he shows Joe something horrid. On the screen, two agents break into Rhea's house. Without hesitation, they shoot her, too. When Joe sees this, his whole world collapses. His temper is more than ever. A huge wave of energy bursts out of his body. Joe transforms into a massive being made of unbelievable power. Now he is stronger than ever. The scientist says to him at that very moment to complete the mission. Joe gazes up at the sky, and at last he sees it. A deadly gamma-ray wave is on a collision course with Earth. Joe has nearly limitless power, and an enormous force field is spread throughout the planet. Just in time, the Earth is saved. The dangerous gamma rays hit Joe's shield and don't destroy humanity. The scientist is proud of himself. His scheme finally succeeded. The world has been saved. However, the price was too high for Joe. Joe is filled with anger and heartbreak and takes revenge on the scientist, destroying him forever. Yet, even after all of this, Joe isn't ready to lose his daughters. With the remaining energy he can transfer, he carefully puts energy into Zoe and Rhea's bodies. Sometime later, Zoe suddenly wakes up. She ends up on the same beach where she spent happy days with her family. She has no more wound. A few moments later, Rhea appears. Somehow their father has brought them both back to life. The sisters cling to one another, both of them crying. After that, they gaze at the sky. Purple energy is still safeguarding the earth, much higher up. But Zoe has a secret inside her. Her father still watches over them. Zoe recalls a Morse code she was taught by Joe when he was a child near the lighthouse. I love you. Meanwhile, Joe responds from the heavens with the same message. The father who fulfills his promise for eternity. His commitment to his daughters, Heather, to always protect them, regardless of what. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Leave a comment about your favorite movie, and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.